Horror has always been a queer genre. That's definitely going to be a statement that's going to cause some perfectly reasonable and not at all outlandish psychotic comments that will have grown adults throwing temper tantrums because something they like is associated with the gays. In any case, here's what I mean. For the entirety of modern history, queer people have been oppressed. Yes, even in today's climate. But the gays can get married now! I hear you cry as you squeeze your MAGA hat in frustration. Yeah, that happened literally less than a decade ago, and there are still currently sitting US senators and governors and other politicians, and in fact an entire political party, hell-bent on reversing it. But even without that particular thing, the gay panic defense, a defense to quote Wikipedia, is the gay panic defense or homosexual advance defiance is a strategy of legal defense which refers to the situation in which a heterosexual individual charged with a violent crime against a homosexual or bisexual individual claims they lost control and reacted violently because an unwanted sexual advance that was made upon them. A defendant will use available legal defenses against assault and murder, with the aim of seeking an acquittal, a mitigated sentence, or conviction of a lesser offense. A defendant may allege to have found the same-sex sexual advantage so offensive or frightening that they were provoked into reacting, they were acting in self-defense, were of diminished capacity or were temporarily insane, and that this circumstance is expulsionary or mitigating. The trans panic defense is a closely related legal strategy applied in cases of assault or murder of a transgender individual with whom assailants had engaged in or was close enough to engaging in sexual relations with and claimed to have been aware that the victim was transgender, producing in the attacker an alleged trans panic reaction, often a manifestation of transphobia. In most cases, the violence or murder is perpetrated by a heterosexual man to an androphilic trans woman. Broadly, the defenses may be called the gay and trans panic defense or the LGBTQ+ panic defense. The reason this is such a problem is because it's often used as an excuse. I had to murder him, Your Honor. It was a man that was going to touch my penis. It's nonsensical and is even used in cases where no sexual advances were being made. On top of that, it is an incredibly ridiculous defense because it oftentimes works, is legal in several states, and the mere mention of a gay or trans person being the victim convinces much of the population to let the person off of the hook. Ironic, considering women have been jailed for life for murdering their kidnapper, abuser, rapist, etc. On top of that, it's still legal in many states to fire a person for being queer, or the at-will clause. Sure, they can't outright say that's why they are firing you, but that's what at-will states are for. On top of that, many states have been found releasing anti-trans laws, so many that the number of proposed anti-trans laws sits somewhere in the hundreds. Sitting US senators or governors like Ron DeSantis outright call for the genocide of trans people, and the constant fear-mongering around trans people from ignorant shit for brains has not only caused the deaths or assaults of several trans people, but even cis people as well, because they were perceived as trans. And that's not even the end of it. There's so much more that I could go into, but I do want to try to keep this video under 2 hours long, so let's move on. So I don't want to hear about how gays aren't oppressed anymore because we have legal marriage and a parade whose main purpose is to show other queer people they aren't alone. But you get a whole month, what about? Shut the fuck up. Because we all know you're going to say veterans or military or whatever. Every single May is Military Appreciation Month. Never seen a single person use that month to celebrate veterans, but your cringe asses will use June to complain about how supposedly veterans only get one day, even though roughly for 15% of our homeless population is veterans, and we all know how you and America as a whole treats the homeless. Anyway, back to the whole horror is a queer genre line I opened this video with. With the context of the fact that queer people have been oppressed for all of modern history, it's important to understand the kind of things that come with oppression. The societal outcast of you as a person is the main thing we'll be talking about today. Part of the reason that Pride Month and Pride parades are so important is a reminder to queer people that they aren't alone even when they feel like they are. Because in our day-to-day lives, especially growing up as a queer person, it's easy to feel outcasted and unwanted. I myself discovered my bisexuality at 11 years old. I also discovered I was non-binary at around 9, but I never had a word to describe that one until recently. I never felt like a boy when people called me one, and in fact being referred to as a boy has always made me uncomfortable and kind of detached in a way. I had some close friends I trusted start referring to me as a girl when I was 13 to see if that would help, but that had the exact same effect. I hate gender roles and stereotypes as well as the constant gender wars of the modern era. I find myself very detached from either side of the spectrum. Some might say I'm gender fluid, but that doesn't fit because I don't fall into either of the gender binary. Truthfully, I fall into the category of agender, or a lack of any gender gender to identify with because I don't identify with any gender. I hate the traditional binary, but I also don't want to commit to some third gender type. I think the whole concept of gender is meaningless in and of itself, and no gendered pronouns or references make me feel like myself, as they always feel something that refers to another person, even when people are directly talking to me. It makes me feel outside of my own body and uncomfortable. If you want this to be compared to something, I want you to picture your biggest insecurity, because we all have one, and then picture that every time somebody looks at you and talks to you, they are constantly pointing out that insecurity. That is what it is like to misgender a trans person. As for my bisexuality, like I've said, I've always known, but I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s when bisexuality basically was ignored and touted as not real. You were either gay or straight. Bisexual characters were always about discovering their real sexuality, and between social media's portrayal of bisexuals and even gay people as a whole, my dad's utter disgust with gay people, which he did apologize to me on his deathbed, which hurts my heart every time I think about it, and my mom and my granny's call me old-fashioned bullshit, which was always just thinly disguised homophobia, I never truly felt like I belonged. And this is where we circle back around to horror. Horror fans have always been social outcasts, because horror, by its nature, is a disturbing genre. It relies on unsettling themes and imagery and the dark realities of the human condition. It's a vast and diverse genre with several different ways to unnerve you, but because of its unnerving nature, horror was only ever celebrated once a year by the general populace, making people who loved horror and celebrated it year-round outcasts within themselves, and outcasts tend to gravitate towards each other, so queer people began investing themselves in horror, finding comfort and solace in the themes of social rejection and the unnerving effect that horror had on a quote-unquote normal people. The key to this integration was we as queer people found a home inside a group of people where we didn't have to out ourselves as queer to feel accepted in a group of outcasts. It was a safe space where we could share our interests and not out ourselves, and because sex and horror go hand in hand, queer people were allowed to have any partner of any gender we wanted because it was seen as experimental and exotic. A man and a woman being together was just freaky and part of the whole horror aesthetic. We aren't like those normal people that have vanilla missionary for the purposes of procreation. We are wild and go outside societal norms. Queer people found a home in horror not only because of its subtext, but because of the freedom of the horror communities. Which brings us to Dead by Daylight. Now, I'm writing this video before Pride Month, so I don't know what BHVR has planned. Normally, every year they release a new set of charms and sometimes do other things to celebrate their queer audiences, which is good. Obviously, I know some people hate the celebration of the bare minimum, as they call it, but I will always praise companies who put actual effort into celebrations of queer joy and acceptance over changing their PFP for a month, but only in the designated countries. And that was my best shot at a German accent. But I wanted to go deeper, reach out to behavior with something that frustrates me. Why, out of a cast of 70 characters, do we only have 2 confirmed queer people? David, whose gayness was confirmed in its home, and Susie, a member of the Legion whose queerness was confirmed in a side comic. That's it. 1 gay guy and 1 bisexual woman. No agenders, NB transgenders, no lesbians, ace, aro, or pansexuals, none of that. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that I hate heteronormativity, the idea that every character is straight until proven otherwise, but it's the lack of confirmed gay people that lead to a rampant hostility toward fans when we headcanon our favorite characters as queer. For example, much of the queer community headcanons Sable and Michaela as lesbians, mostly from the fact that witches and goths typically tend to be queer again due to an inherent connection to the art forms and lifestyles associated with being an outcast and how that trends to draw queer people in, but also because the length Sable has went to reunite with Michaela made a lot of us feel a stronger connection than is outright stated, and that has led to a large community backlash that tripled my block list across all social media platforms as the straights, TM, were foaming at the mouth at the prospect of their goth mommy not being attracted to them, despite the fact that it's a fictional woman and she wouldn't be attracted to them regardless. With a genre that is dominated by queer people and a game that is dominated by queer people, we find ourselves completely and utterly underrepresented. Many characters in the game have undefined sexualities and gender identities, so I'm not even asking you to create new characters with these things, I'm just asking you to do what you did with David and Susie and retcon some of your existing ones. This video is also going to spark the "what does it matter" comments, and I'm going to try and approach this as nice as I can because I am exhausted of having the representation matters argument. As I stated in the beginning parts of this video, queer people people are oppressed, and with the oppression goes hand in hand with the societal outcasting of queer people. It's easy to feel alone in a world where your peers are not the same as you are, and in a society that celebrates heteronormativity at every turn all year round, except for the one time of year where companies participate in rainbow capitalism, representation for ourselves and our favorite forms of media help alleviate that feeling of loneliness. To have your identity or your sexuality represented and acknowledged feels important and validated. I mentioned earlier how every TV show, book, movie, and more completely and utterly erased any bisexuals they had, shoving them into the binary of gay or straight in the end. It was always, oh, they thought they were gay, or they thought they were straight, and never, bro, they can like both, it's not a big deal. It made me feel empty, unwanted, and not real. I questioned myself a lot as a kid because of this feeling, and being attracted to both was never validated by anyone, and I felt broken, which led to at least 2 of my 9 suicide attempts. So yes, representation does matter, especially in a world that largely represents only one thing, to the point that that thing, in this case white cisgender heterosexuals, is considered the default. And there's nothing wrong with being these things, but as a group you're so overrepresented, people assume everyone belongs in these 3 groups until shown otherwise. In the case of race, whiteness is so overrepresented that people of color existing is enough for knee-jerk reactionary morons to scream about how something is woke because not every available character in something is white. Or the game devs to take offense to someone saying that POC representation is desperately needed in a game because 1 black guy and 1 Latino woman exist in as playable characters while the rest are white. And similarly, heteronormativity is normalized so much that every single fictional character is defaulted to that state, and doing so much as even suggesting some characters may be changed or created to represent other sexualities and gender identities leads to similar knee-jerk reaction of people screaming about wokeness in the same tone one would use a slur in the 1940s. Overall, I feel like BHVR has done a great job celebrating its queer audience, but I'd really like if we got some more representation along with that celebration, and that's all I'm really asking for. Thank you for watching. This is one of those videos where I know the type of people it's going to attract, but I've never been one to back down from topics that are considered controversial, and I'm not going to change my opinion because a bunch of people will choose to harass me. I'm sure I'll be deleting and banning a lot of people for outright bigotry, but for those of you who are here to join me in calling for what's right, I thank you. And as always, a very big special thank you to my channel members listed on screen now. If you want to find out how to become a channel member today, get awesome perks like seeing videos early, merch discount codes, and more, then please click that join button down below. I hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month. I love you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Can't get enough daily Dead by Daylight content? Then check out my second channel, The Kaiser Extras, where I upload gameplay footage, me reacting to your Dead by Daylight clips, and more. We also have a new short that goes live every single day, so you can catch up on all the greatest clips from stream. We'll see you over there. Link is in the description.